episode of the DailyFlip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about the No Kings protest and the broader implications of the movement. So, we obviously know that this is one of the bigger protest movements that's come across the entire United States since Donald Trump has been in office, even since the first time. What will the ramifications be? Will there be momentum coming out of it? Will the Democrats take it seriously? All these questions are extremely important, and we'll get to what we can. So with that said, let's actually jump into our daily debate. Is this movement going to inspire any change? Is it going to affect any positive, negative, neutral, any sort of change, in your opinion, in the makeup of the parties, in the politic thereof, the issue set of the people? I want to know your opinions. Throw it down there in the comment section. And with that, we're going to jump into the article. This one comes from the Daily Wire. Headline reads, "We asked No Kings protesters what made Trump a king. They couldn't say," end quote. Now, the No Kings protest is an interesting phenomenon. And that's not to say that other protests are not interesting. The fact that people are willing to get out there, they're willing to say their opinion, put their faces on TV, hold up signs, be accountable for what they do, is an interesting phenomenon in general. To move beyond the shelter of your own house, behind your phone, in this age is extremely unique, but even in previous times when people would protest kings or against regimes, all of these people are brave. That's no doubt. And that's not to say that these people are inherently brave because, the administration is what they claim to be. But to back your words should be common. It should be what we practice, to be able to put a face behind what you believe if you're going to go out there and protest. I don't feel like that's crazy, and I'm not saying that they have to. What I'm saying is I don't feel like it's crazy. Many of the multiple founding fathers hid behind pen names, so to be anonymous in a time where you feel as though there could be negative repercussions to you is also not inherently bad. But when there is the possibility of risk, there is a certain amount of praise isn't the right word, but admiration that needs to be brought on to these people. They're willing to back up what they say, and they're willing to go out there and possibly put their jobs on the line, possibly put their livelihoods on the line. That's all possible in a world where social media will blow anything up, especially anything that is perceived as divisive. But are they standing for something that actually matters? That is the more important question. Now that we've admired them for going out and doing what they believe is correct, do they actually pursue an ends that is truthful? Is Trump a king? Well, obviously not by definition. He was elected. Is he acting as though he is a king? Is he taking on the powers of a monarch? Is he stripping the other branches of government, the commons, so to speak, of their powers and trying to dissolve them and make them useless? I think you could honestly lean both ways. I think that for the most part, Trump is just picking up the tools that have been left behind by different presidents thereof and trying new applications with said tools. But nonetheless, this executive power surge that we seem to be seeing under Trump was actually enabled by people like Woodrow Wilson, by people like Lyndon B. Johnson, like George Bush Jr., or even Abraham Lincoln. All these presidents used excess power in order to reach their ends. And now we see Trump doing the exact same thing. Now the argument then would become, are his ends inherently dictatorial? I think that while his affect may seem that way, it very seldom actually is. But that doesn't mean that his actions, like having the protections in place for ICE officers that do not reveal their face as implements of the government, as implements of force, the fact that they do not have to show who they are, that they can hide behind a mask when enforcing the law, is something that is deeply, deeply troubling to me. And when it's pointed to in that context, I understand why people say this is fascistic because it feels outside the norms. It doesn't inherently mean it's fascistic, but it feels outside the norms, and it does feel like a violation of the pact that we have with the government. We want accountability. We want transparency. If you're going to do things in our name and you are going to use the force that we have willingly given you as participants as part of the system, you are accountable to us to some degree, and not being willing to reveal your face, not being allowed to keep these people accountable, most definitely feels like a violation of that agreement that we make with the government itself. And they have plenty of arguments as to why it's okay. But it doesn't change the fact that you are literally taking away one of the only things that we are able to push back on. We can hold individual officers accountable so that even if we can't vote out an administration, even if we can't push back against them, we are able to hold those people accountable and make every single one of them at least think, is what they're doing legal, and also will they have to face any social consequences for doing so if they do so in a way that is not completely coherent with law and therefore could face some sort of charges. That is an important distinction to make. But will this movement that, whether you think they're justified or not, and I think I laid out a good argument for why some people can reach that conclusion, whether they're justified or not in what their belief is, the broader question, is whether or not it will actually affect change. And this is where I'm much more divided. I can see the opinion that some of these people provide, especially on the ICE angle, but that doesn't necessarily mean I see what they're getting at when it comes to looking into the future. Is this the way to build political infrastructure? Is this the way to bully your way into controlling a party? I think the latter is more likely than the former, but the former is necessary in order to do the latter. And I was just watching a brief interview with the gentleman who's running for the House I believe in San Francisco. He's very, very progressive. Can't remember his name off the top of my head, which is unfortunate. But the point being, he was at the protest in San Francisco, the No Kings protest. And he makes a solid argument that this grassroots infrastructure is just as important and will propel many of these candidates who are also in a similar vein to him, who are outsiders, who are insurgents into the Democratic Party, can very well lift them up. And the Tea Party was an example that is being weighed back and forth between himself and the host. And the host brings up a good point, and it's very, very true. The Tea Party not only had grassroots infrastructure, not only had the frustrations of the people at their feet as viable stones to burn them into actually going into action, but they also had the means to get away from the burning sensation to actually impel themselves forward with funding that comes from large donors. And it doesn't seem that this movement has that. It doesn't seem that the people riding on the coattails of it in order to get to political office, or even mobilizing a lot of these protests in order to get to political office, have the ability to outspend their opponents. And that, though, should not necessarily be the case, that you spend your way into a seat. That is the reality. And if you want to affect that change and make it so that you don't have to spend your way into a seat, you're gonna have to probably have backing. And I don't see it materializing beyond that. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, but lots of people would probably think in the past that it's actually not necessary to have money, and yet then they're proven wrong. A political movement, especially one that needs to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Needs to be coordinated, most definitely is going to need money behind them. And if you were to believe otherwise, you are naive to believe simply that, we can get together, we can make a squad inside Congress. How long did the squad take to fold? How long did it take them to become apparatchiks of the current Democratic Party, to fall in line, to get their committee assignments and still protest, be a little loud? But yet they are still just another body, another person in a seat trying to make sure that they don't upset the donors and they get their money going into their next primary or their next major election. It's the reality of politics, unfortunately. But it is how it is. It is how it is. This movement will not be that. And I'm very, very certain of this. Will there be something that is born of this? Yes, but there will be no king's constituency in the House, in my opinion. There can be a progressive caucus. There can be a caucus that has people that were participating in these movements, but there will not be a no king's caucus enough to pressure the party in a certain direction like there was with the Tea Party for the Republicans. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. I want to hear your opinions. Throw it down there in the comment section. I want to hear what you have to say. With all that, if you want to find any of the articles from today, literally there's just one, you can find it down there in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there you can find podcasts on Spotify, Podcast Podvine, as well as Apple Podcast. Yes, we're on Apple Podcast now. And you can find the Twitter handle down there at your Daily Flip in the description, where I post links to these episodes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 6 and 6 on Tuesday and Thursday. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.